We're losing him. Get me 2 large bore IVs and type O negative, ready now. He's bottoming out, airway secure.
Blood pooled beneath the stretcher wheels as they rushed Viktor Sokolov through the emergency room doors, and the only sound louder than the machine's screaming was his wife Elena's voice breaking as she tried to understand how 3 bullets to the chest hadn't killed him yet. The surgeons were already in position, equipment ready, team assembled, everything prepared except the one thing hospitals always need before they save a life: money. "Mrs. Sokolov," the administrator said, her voice clinical and cold, in the way that people sound when they've had this conversation too many times. "The procedure requires immediate payment authorization, $100,000. We need confirmation before surgery begins." Elena stared at her, at this woman in her pressed white coat who was standing between her husband and survival. Viktor was dying, actively, measurably dying on a table 12 feet away, and this woman wanted numbers on a screen first. "His phone," Elena said. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. "His accounts are on his phone. I just need to—" She pressed Viktor's phone against his unconscious face. The screen lit up. Face ID failed. Try again. She tried again. Again. The angle was wrong. The lighting was wrong. Viktor's face was too swollen, too broken, too far from whatever the phone remembered him looking like when he was conscious and whole. Face ID failed. Enter passcode. Elena's mind went completely blank. She had been married to Viktor Sokolov for 14 years. She had lived in his house, raised his children, attended his dinners, managed his legitimate businesses while pretending not to know about the illegitimate ones. She had shared his bed, his name, his public life. She did not know his phone password. She stood there in the fluorescent hospital hallway holding a device that contained access to millions of dollars, staring at a 6-digit barrier she could not cross while her husband bled out behind a set of swinging doors. Viktor's brother Mikhail arrived first, broad-shouldered, sharp-eyed, moving through the emergency room like he owned it, which in certain functional ways he did. 3 of Viktor's lieutenants followed, then cousins, associates, people whose names Elena barely knew but whose presence filled the waiting room with a particular kind of tension that made the security guards nervous. Mikhail looked at the phone in Elena's hands. "You can't unlock it. Face ID won't recognize him like this, and I don't know the code." He said something in Russian that Elena didn't catch, but understood from tone alone. Then, 14 years, Elena. You've been married to him for 14 years and you don't know his phone password." She wanted to scream at him. She wanted to throw the phone at his face. Instead, she said very quietly, "Do you?" Mikhail said nothing, which was its own answer. The administrator reappeared. "Mrs. Sokolov, we need authorization now or we'll have to—" "We're working on it," one of the lieutenants said, stepping forward with the kind of calm threat that made the administrator take an involuntary step back. "Hospital policy requires—" "We heard you," Mikhail said. Elena turned to the assembled group, these dangerous men who had followed her husband for years, who had profited from his decisions and feared his anger, and now stood uselessly in a hospital corridor because none of them could unlock a phone. "Does anyone know his passcode? Anyone at all?" Silence. Somewhere behind the surgical doors, a monitor began beeping faster. A nurse ran past. Another. Viktor was running out of time, and they were standing in a waiting room full of men who controlled half the city's criminal infrastructure, staring at a locked screen like it was a puzzle none of them had been trained to solve. That was when the elevator doors opened, and she walked out. Elena saw her before anyone else did, maybe because Elena had been trained by 14 years of marriage to notice the women her husband looked at too long at parties, the ones who texted at odd hours, the ones whose names appeared in his phone under initials or fake business titles. This woman was younger than Elena. Not dramatically, maybe early 30s, but enough. Dark hair pulled back in a way that looked effortless, but probably wasn't. She wore a black coat over jeans and boots, and she walked through that waiting room like she had every right to be there, which made Elena's entire body go cold with a rage she hadn't known she was capable of. Mikhail saw her next. His expression shifted immediately into something hard and territorial. "You need to leave," he said, not a suggestion. Her name was Irina, though Elena didn't know that yet. Stopped walking. She looked at Mikhail with the kind of calm that suggested she had been threatened by better men and survived it. "Is he alive?" she asked. "That's not your concern," said Mikhail. "Is he alive?" Elena stepped forward before Mikhail could answer. She had spent 14 years being the gracious wife, the diplomatic presence at dinners and funerals, the woman who smiled when she wanted to break hearts. She was done with that version of herself. "You have no right to be here," Elena said. Her voice was shaking but steady. "This is a family matter." Irina looked at her for a long moment, then very quietly, "I know." There was something in the way she said it, not defiant, not apologetic, just factual, that made Elena realize this woman had thought about this moment before, had probably imagined it, standing in a hospital across from the wife of the man she'd been sleeping with, knowing she was the villain in everyone else's story, and accepting it anyway. One of the lieutenants moved to block the hallway. Mikhail's hand went to his side in a gesture Elena recognized as preparatory violence. The entire room was about to explode into something ugly and irreversible. And then Irina said, "I can unlock his phone." The silence that followed that sentence was absolute. Elena looked down at the phone still clutched in her hand, at the locked screen that had defeated her, defeated Mikhail, defeated everyone who was supposed to matter in Viktor's life. She looked back at this woman, this stranger, this intruder, this mistress, and felt something crack inside her chest that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with a truth she'd been avoiding for years. "How?" Elena heard herself ask. Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "He told me," Irina said simply, "in case something like this ever happened." In case something like this ever happened. Viktor had prepared for his own death, had chosen someone to trust with access to everything he owned, and he had chosen this woman. Not his wife, not his brother. Her. The administrator reappeared in the doorway, her expression urgent. "Mrs. Sokolov, we're out of time. If you cannot authorize payment in the next 3 minutes." Elena looked at Elena. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to refuse, to throw this woman out, to find another way, to protect whatever remained of her dignity and her marriage and the illusion that she had ever mattered to the man dying behind those doors. Instead, she held out the phone. "Do it," Elena said. "Save him." Irina took the phone from Elena's hand without looking at her. She walked past Mikhail, past the lieutenants, straight to the surgical suite doors, where a nurse was waiting impatiently. Everyone followed. Elena, Mikhail, the entire assembled criminal hierarchy of Viktor Sokolov's organization, all of them crowding into the hallway like spectators at an execution, watching this woman they all despised hold the power none of them had. Irina approached Viktor's unconscious form on the surgical table. The doctors were scrubbed and ready, instruments laid out, the whole room in suspended animation, waiting for permission to save a life. She pressed the phone to Viktor's face. Face IDs failed. Elena felt a sick flash of vindication. See, she doesn't know him either. She's just... Irina's fingers moved across the screen. 6 quick taps. Deliberate. Certain. The phone unlocked. She opened his bank app and transferred the money to the hospital's account. Irina handed the phone to the administrator without a word. The administrator checked the screen, nodded to the surgical team, and said, "We're cleared. Begin." The room exploded into organized chaos. Doctors moved, nurses called out numbers, machines beeped and hummed and began the complex work of keeping Viktor Sokolov alive long enough to repair the damage 3 bullets had done to his chest. Elena stood frozen in the doorway, watching it all happen, watching her husband's life being saved with money his mistress had just transferred, and she felt something inside her simply stop. Not her heart. Her heart was still beating, mechanical and distant. It was the part of her that had believed she mattered. That was what stopped. Irina walked past her on the way out. For just a second, their eyes met. Elena expected to see triumph there, or cruelty, or the smug satisfaction of a woman who had just proven her place in a man's life. Instead, she saw something that looked uncomfortably like pity. And then Irina was gone, disappearing down the hallway toward the elevators, leaving Elena standing in a hospital room full of people fighting to save her husband she had never truly known. 2 years earlier, Viktor met Irina at a gallery opening in the city. He wasn't supposed to be there. He'd gone to meet a contact about something forgettable, some deal that evaporated the moment he saw her standing in front of a painting he couldn't name, looking at it like she was having a conversation with it. He'd approached her because that was what Viktor did. He moved toward things that interested him with the confidence of a man who had spent his life taking what he wanted. But when he spoke to her, she didn't react the way people usually did around him. No fear, no immediate deference. She just looked at him, really looked, the way you look at something you're trying to understand, and said, "You don't actually care about art, do you?" It wasn't a question. He should have walked away. Instead, he laughed, actually laughed, which was something Viktor Sokolov almost never did in public. "No," he admitted, "but I care about people who do. What does that painting say to you?" She told him, not the art school explanation, the real one, the one about loneliness and the gap between what we show people and what we actually are. And Viktor, who had spent 30 years building walls around himself so high that even his wife lived outside them, found himself saying things he'd never said to anyone. Not that night, but over the weeks that followed. In the beginning, it was supposed to be simple, an affair, a distraction, the kind of thing powerful men have because they can. But Irina never asked him for anything, never wanted jewelry or apartments or introductions to influential people. She worked as a translator for an import company. She lived in a modest flat in a neighborhood Viktor's men would never patrol. She existed entirely outside the world he controlled, and that made her the only person in his life he could actually talk to. She knew what he was. She wasn't naive, but she also knew who he was, the version underneath the reputation, the man who read philosophy books in his office when no one was watching, who hated the violence but accepted it as operational necessity, who had married Elena because their families had aligned and stayed married because divorce would create complications he couldn't afford. Irina saw all of it and stayed anyway. Not because she wanted his money, she had refused it repeatedly, which had confused Viktor more than almost anything else in his life. She stayed because, and this was the part that eventually broke something in him, she loved him, actually loved him, not the power or the fear or the empire, just him. Elena had never known any of this. She knew about the affair, of course she knew, wives always know, but she'd assumed it was transactional, that Viktor kept a mistress the way he kept expensive watches, as a status symbol, a luxury. She had assumed wrong. The truth was worse. The truth was that Viktor had found something with Irina that he'd never had with Elena, actual intimacy, the kind built on understanding rather than obligation. And now, standing in a hospital waiting room at midnight while her husband fought for his life in surgery, Elena was beginning to piece that truth together through the evidence of a phone she couldn't unlock and a woman who could. Elena sat in the waiting room surrounded by Viktor's people, and none of them spoke to her. They talked among themselves, low, tense conversations about who ordered the hit, which rival family was responsible, what the retaliation would look like, but they didn't include her. She had always been peripheral to this world, the decorative wife, the legitimate front, the woman who hosted dinners and smiled for photographs, and never asked questions about the men who came to the house at odd hours. Now she understood just how peripheral she actually was. Mikhail sat beside her at one point. He didn't look at her when he spoke. "That woman," he said, "Irina, you knew about her?" "I knew there was someone," Elena said. "I didn't know it mattered." "She saved his life tonight." "I know." He was quiet for a long time. Then, "Viktor told me once that you were the smartest decision he ever made, that marrying you gave him legitimacy he couldn't buy, that you made him look human." Elena felt something crack inside her chest. Made him look human. Not happy, not loved, not even understood. Just human. Just presentable. She stood up, walked to the bathroom, locked herself in a stall, and cried so quietly that no one outside would hear. When she came back out, the surgeon was waiting in the hallway, still in scrubs, looking exhausted. "He's stable," the surgeon said. "Critical, but stable. The next 48 hours will tell us more." The room exhaled collectively. Mikhail nodded. The lieutenants exchanged looks. Everyone began making calls, updating the network, setting plans in motion. Elena just stood there. "Can I see him?" she asked. The surgeon hesitated. "Family only for now. Immediate family." "I'm his wife," Elena said. "Of course, this way." She followed him down a long corridor to the ICU. Viktor was in a private room behind glass walls, his body connected to machines that beeped and hummed and measured the distance between alive and not. Elena stood in the doorway and looked at the man she'd been married to for 14 years. He looked smaller than she remembered, vulnerable, human in a way she'd never seen him before. She walked to his bedside and picked up his hand, the one without the IV, and held it. It was warm, real, fragile in a way that Viktor Sokolov had never allowed himself to be while conscious. And Elena realized with a clarity that felt like drowning that she didn't know this man at all. She had lived with him, slept beside him, raised children with him, but she had never known him, not the way Irina apparently did. She sat there for a long time, holding the hand of a stranger who wore her husband's face. And then she saw it. Viktor's phone was on the side table, the one Irina had unlocked, the one that contained access to his entire life. Elena picked it up. It was still unlocked. Irina must have left it that way. Elena knew she shouldn't look, knew that whatever she found would only make everything worse, knew that some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. She looked anyway. The messages were filed under a contact labeled IR, just initials, the way Viktor labeled everyone he wanted to keep compartmentalized. Elena opened them.
There were hundreds, maybe thousands, years of conversations between her husband and the woman who had just saved his life. She scrolled to the beginning, found the first message Viktor had ever sent. It was dated 2 years ago, 3 months after their anniversary dinner, where Elena had told him she wanted to try couples counseling, and he'd said he was too busy. "Viktor, I enjoyed tonight. You made me think about things I normally avoid thinking about. Irina, good things or bad things? Viktor, both. That's the problem." Elena kept scrolling, watching her husband's life unfold in words he'd never said to her. "Viktor, Elena asked me today what I was thinking about. I said, work. I was actually thinking about what you said last week, about how power is just another kind of loneliness. Irina, did you want to tell her that? Viktor, no, she wouldn't understand. Irina, or you don't let her." Elena's hands were shaking. She kept reading, couldn't stop. "Irina, you don't have to keep doing this, you know, the violence, the empire. You could walk away. Viktor, and be what? A normal man? Irina, would that be so terrible? Viktor, you wouldn't love a normal man. Irina, I love you, not what you do. There's a difference." The messages went on and on, conversations about books, philosophy, the nature of guilt, Viktor talking about his childhood in ways Elena had never heard, Irina pushing back on his justifications, refusing to let him hide behind his reputation. And then, 6 months ago, Elena found the message that made her stop breathing. Viktor, if something happens to me, and eventually something will, I need you to know my passcode, just in case. Irina, Viktor, I don't want... Viktor, it's our date, the first night we talked, at the gallery, the one you say I don't remember, but I do. Irina, you remembered. Viktor, I remember everything about you. The password to the phone was the date Viktor met Irina, not his wedding anniversary, not his children's birthdays, the night he fell in love with someone who wasn't his wife. Elena set the phone down very carefully. She looked at Viktor, still unconscious, still fighting to survive, and she realized she had spent 14 years married to a man who had been emotionally faithful to someone else for the last 2. The door opened behind her. She turned, expecting a nurse. It was Irina. They looked at each other across Viktor's unconscious body, the wife and the mistress, the official woman and the real one, and Elena felt every defense she'd built over 14 years collapse into something raw and honest and completely unbearable. "You came back," Elena said. "I needed to know if he survived." Irina's voice was quiet, careful, like she was navigating a minefield. "The guards let you through?" Irina, Mikhail told them to. Of course he did, because even Viktor's brother understood what Elena was only beginning to accept, that this woman mattered to Viktor in ways his wife never had. Elena picked up the phone from the bedside table and held it out. "I read your messages," Elena said. "All of them." Irina went very still. "Did you know," Elena asked, "that he made his password about you? That he trusted you with everything? That he told you things he never told me?" "Yes," Irina said. "Just that. No apology, no justification." "Did you love him? Actually love him? Or was it..." Elena's voice broke. "Was it just exciting, being with a dangerous man, having the power to..." "I loved him," Irina said quietly. "I still do. That's why I'm here." Elena wanted to hate her, wanted to scream at her, wanted to blame her for destroying a marriage that, she was beginning to understand, had been hollow long before Irina arrived. Instead, she heard herself ask, "What was he like, with you?" Irina looked at Viktor, and something softened in her expression that made Elena's chest ache. "He was himself," Irina said. "Not the boss, not the husband, not the reputation, just Viktor, the man who read Dostoevsky and hated himself for the things he'd done, but kept doing them anyway because he didn't know how to stop. The man who was terrified of being ordinary, who thought love was weakness until..." She stopped, but Elena understood what she hadn't said. "Until you." "I never knew that man," Elena said. "I was married to him for 14 years and I never knew him at all." "I know. Did he ever talk about me?" Irina hesitated. Elena saw the calculation in her eyes, the decision between kindness and truth. "He said you were a good mother," Irina said carefully, "that you gave him stability, that he respected you. But he didn't love me." Silence. "Say it," Elena said. "I need to hear someone say it." "No," Irina said quietly. "He didn't. Not the way you deserved." The truth hung between them like a physical thing, heavy, undeniable, the kind of truth that changes everything that comes after. Elena looked down at Viktor's unconscious face, at the man she'd spent half her life trying to please, trying to understand, trying to love enough that he'd eventually love her back. She had failed. Not because she wasn't good enough, but because he had already given that part of himself to someone else. She set the phone on the bedside table and turned to leave. "Where are you going?" Irina asked. "Home. To pack." You're leaving him? I left him years ago, Elena said. I just didn't know it until tonight. She walked to the door, stopped, turned back. Take care of him, Elena said. You're better at it than I ever was. And then she left. Left the hospital, left Viktor, left the life she'd built around a man who had never truly been hers. Behind her, Irina stood alone in the ICU room, looking at the man she loved, the man who might not survive the night, and felt the weight of everything that had just been handed to her. Not victory, not triumph, just the terrible, complicated responsibility of being the person someone actually chose. He was alone when it happened. Irina had gone to get coffee, the guards were outside the door, the medical staff between rounds. He opened his eyes to fluorescent lights and the steady beep of machines and a profound disorientation that took several minutes to resolve into memory. The ambush, the bullets, the hospital. He reached for the bedside table out of instinct, looking for his phone. It was there. Next to it, a handwritten note. He recognized the handwriting immediately. Elena. He opened it. Letter from Elena. Viktor, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Not far. The children still need their father, and I won't take that from you. But I can't be your wife anymore. Not after learning what that word actually meant to you. I read your messages with her. All of them. I know about the password. I know about the conversations. I know that you gave her the version of yourself I spent 14 years trying to find. I'm not angry. I'm just done. She saved your life. Not me. Not your brother, not any of the people who are supposed to matter in your world. She did, and she did it because she loves you in a way I never could and you never wanted from me. I hope you survive this. I hope you become the man she sees when she looks at you. I hope you find whatever it is you've been searching for. But I won't be there to watch. Take care of yourself, Viktor. Or better yet, let her do it. Elena. Viktor read the letter twice, then set it down carefully and stared at the ceiling for a very long time. When Irina came back with coffee 20 minutes later, she found him awake. She stopped in the doorway, her expression unreadable. They looked at each other across the distance of the room, the man who had survived and the woman who had saved him, and Viktor saw his entire life reorganizing itself around a truth he'd been avoiding for 2 years. He loved her. Actually loved her, not as a distraction or an escape or a rebellion against the life he'd built, just loved her, and it had cost him everything else. Elena left, he said. His voice was rough from disuse. I know, Irina said quietly. Because of you. Because of us, Irina corrected. Because of what we are, what we've always been. Viktor was quiet for a long time. Then, I made the password about you, he said. The night we met. I don't even remember deciding to do it. I just did. I know. That should have told me something. It did. You just weren't ready to hear it. She walked to his bedside, sat in the chair Elena had occupied 2 weeks ago, took his hand. Viktor looked at their joined hands and felt something shift inside him, something that had been rigid and defended his entire adult life, finally loosening into something that felt uncomfortably like surrender. What happens now? He asked. You recover, you figure out who tried to kill you, you decide what kind of man you want to be when you're healthy enough to choose. And you? I'll be here, Irina said simply, if you want me to be. Viktor closed his eyes, felt the weight of that offer, the impossible kindness of someone loving him not despite what he was, but alongside it, not asking him to change, not trying to fix him, just staying. When he opened his eyes again, they were wet. Viktor Sokolov, the man who controlled half the city's criminal infrastructure, who had ordered deaths and destroyed lives and built an empire on fear, cried in front of another person for the first time since he was a child. Irina held his hand and said nothing. because she understood what Elena never had, that Viktor didn't need someone to make him better, he just needed someone to see him clearly and choose him anyway. The Mafia boss's wife couldn't unlock his phone because she'd never known the password to his heart, but his mistress could because she'd been living inside it all along.
Please like and subscribe.